Chapter 12 starts our journey in looking at external influences on consumer behavior. And specifically, the first three areas that we explore in Chapter 12 and why we call it consumer diversity is actually understanding all of the different aspects that may contribute to consumers, the external influences, meaning society, culture, friends, family, religious beliefs, ethnicity, where we live, our gender, as well as the roles associated with that particular gender, depending upon where we live and the culture in which we reside, all shape and influence and create a kind of unique mosaic for each individual. So if you can kind of look at this particular chapter and say, if you were putting together the pieces of a puzzle for an individual and you were to actually capture and connect and understand a little bit how each of these different facets compose or create someone's perspective in how they see the world, how they view the world, how they relate to the world, that in essence is the essence of this particular chapter. For this particular chapter, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this down into three segments, three 5-minute segments, and we're going to talk about age first. And specifically in regard to age, if we look at this slide, the U.S. population, there are specific reasons why a lot of studies or marketing researchers will divide these categories in these particular ways, because they're not divided equally. You know, we have the under 18 category, 18 to 24, 25 to 44, 45 to 64, and 65 and over. And upon closer inspection, what each of these different age categories indicate is the likelihood that people within these particular age cohorts are experiencing very similar items in terms of their life stages. So in thinking about that, in terms of what's important, what's a focus to somebody who's 18 to 24 years of age versus as a cohort, what is most likely to be important and what people are focusing on at the ages of 25 to 44 may be fundamentally different. So take a minute and actually look across these different age cohorts and think about what are the different stages, what are the things that may be important to people in these particular age segments. And then the underlying thing, the other aspect about age is not only what they're going through at that particular stage in their life, or what they're more likely to go through, but the other aspect in regard to age is something called generational theory. And generational theory basically suggests that what a certain generation of young people experienced from a socio-cultural or a society perspective in their formative years has direct influence and bearing on shaping their perspectives when they actually enter into adulthood and going into later in life. An example of this are people who were actually born or raised in the Depression. And you may have a grandmother or a grandparent or a great-grandparent. And what can be sometimes typical of this generation is that they were very conservative with money because they actually experienced the Depression, and they tend to be distrustful of banks. So literally the old saying of, a grandfather has, $1 million stuffed in the mattress kind of plays into this, in that they believe that they were very thrifty savers because they never wanted to experience perhaps what they went through in the Depression. So each of these different age groups or these generations, again, they don't follow a certain pattern. The difference is what determines the difference between Generation X and the baby boomers per se is that the time in which they were growing up were fundamentally different. So if we were to look at Generation X, from a society standpoint in the United States, this was the period of time when a lot of families were going through divorce, which was typically not heard of or not as common. So we had the term latchkey kids, and these kids were actually raised on television. And as a result, later in adulthood, they tend to be very skeptical of TV, advertising, and marketers. Conversely, when we look at the baby boomers, they came up in the golden years. So their perspective on life tends to be fundamentally different.